everyone. I am going to show you today how to make an 8-sided snowflake. This is the snowflake that we made during our live lesson, our remote live lesson. So what you'll need for this kind of a snowflake is a piece of paper, a pair of scissors, and if you have one around the house and you want to get extra fancy, a hole puncher can add a little bit of extra to your snowflake. So as far as the paper goes, the thinner the paper, the better, right? If you have a choice between copy paper and construction paper, choose the copy paper because it's going to be easier to fold and it's going to be easier to cut. So here we go. So sometimes I'll even, if I'm doing something, I'll use extra papers that come in the mail that my parents don't need, right? I don't live with my parents anymore, but you know what I mean. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do is we are going to make a perfect square. And like I tell you all the time, the way that I'm showing you is not the right way or the best way, but it's the way that works for me, and it may be different from how you've seen it before. I just like to put tools in your toolbox. You know how that goes. Okay, so I am going to take this edge right here, this shorter edge, and I'm going to try to line it up right along this longer edge, right on the corner. So I'm gonna fold it over this way, right? I'm just gonna fold it over like this. And I wanna make sure before I push this down that it's right on the corner. If I have a little square edge, a little flat edge right there, then I'm not all the way out on the corner. So I'm just gonna kind of pull this up a little bit until I get it all lined up along the edge, and then I'm gonna hold it down and crease it. Right, this works out very nicely also if you're trying to do origami, which often requires you to start with a square piece of paper. So, right, we took this corner, whoops, right over to the edge. Now we have a little rectangle over here that's kind of left over. We're gonna remove that and set it aside. Maybe we can make a nice bookmark or something out of it, whoops, later. Here we go. So I'm gonna set that aside. So now we have this square piece of paper, right? And we are just gonna refold it right where we folded it the first time. So now it looks a bit like a pyramid, except it's not three-dimensional, right? It's got a long edge here and two equal but shorter edges on the other side. So let's see, I'm gonna go ahead and fold this long edge. Sometimes I put my finger down right in between and just kind of fold it right over. Okay, so along this long edge, we're gonna fold it over. We're gonna touch the corners right there. And then we're going to smooth it out and crease it. Right, so now I've made two folds. From here, I folded it once, I folded it twice. Now I'm gonna flip it this way so that the long edge is away from me. And you don't have to do this part, but for some of us, it's very helpful because a lot of us get it all folded up. Lunchtime, and we get it all folded up, and then we make the cuts and we open it up and it just falls into pieces. It's very frustrating. So one of the things that I might suggest, right, if you have it turned upside down like this, is make a little mark. Sometimes I'll do it on both sides just to make sure. Right, I'll make a little mark right there, and I'm gonna open mine up. You don't have to open yours, but what I want to show you is that mark is in the middle of the paper, which means that when we fold it all up and start cutting pieces out of it, we will know where the center is, and that's gonna help us. Okay, so now we're back here. I made my mark right here. We're gonna make one more fold, right in the middle of the long edge. We're gonna fold that over, just like that. We're gonna line it up with its other little corners, and there we go. Okay, now we know that this is the middle. It's gonna be the bottom, I guess, of this part of our snowflake. Now, this part right here, these little flappy bits, if we don't cut those off, then they, you know, they stay and it becomes a beautifully decorative square, right? Which is fine. But if what we want is a snowflake, then we're gonna need to take our scissors and we're gonna need to cut part of this off. Now we have some options, okay? Always options. You could cut it straight across. You could cut it at an angle. You could try to cut it as a curve. You could really make any kind of cut you want to, as long as you get rid of that corner at the top. Not the one with the dot on it, but the one at the top. So let's see, I'm gonna be fancy. I'm gonna cut that off. It looks kind of like a kite, but it's lopsided. Let's see if I can even it out. I may be making it worse. And then I'll just cut this part off like that. Okay, so now I've kind of made a, still a little uneven, but that's okay. So I've just kind of, it almost looks like a very pointy diamond now. And I'm gonna open it again. You don't have to open yours, but I just wanna show you the difference it makes. So now that's what the edges of my snowflake look like, the shape of the outside of my snowflake. And now it's time to start cutting. So I have these nice big scissors, but when you're cutting, okay, or when I'm cutting, I find it's a lot easier for me if I open the scissors up nice and wide and really put whatever I'm cutting down into the scissors. I'm not a nibbler, right? Nibbling doesn't really work very well for me. We are gonna create the simplest shape first, which is a triangle. And it's really important when you, okay, sometimes you just wanna make some great big shapes. The first cut, right, is at an angle. The second cut has to touch the first cut or your pieces will not fall out. If your pieces don't fall out, then you will not be able to see the pattern on your snowflake, okay? So there's a nice great big cut, because one of the things that makes a snowflake look fancy and delicate is when you remove as much of the paper as you can, right? The more holes it has in it, the fancier it looks. So I like to start on the top, kind of get some cuts in on the top. You do not have to use triangles, right? You can use curved shapes, you can use whatever you like. I'm gonna ask you this, right? When you make a cut, if you make a teeny little cut like this on the edge, all the way down, you're gonna have a lot of extra, that one doesn't wanna come out, a lot of extra paper just kind of sitting there in the middle. So what I'm gonna ask you to do is I'm gonna ask you to come as far towards the middle as you can, right? You don't wanna go past the middle necessarily, although I guess you could, just so long as you don't touch your shapes, because if your shapes touch, this piece is just gonna fall right off, right? So I got my scissors nice and wide open. We have a lot of paper layers to cut, right? So sometimes it's difficult to cut all those layers of paper. Here we go. And then cut out some snowflake right here. So I'm just kind of cutting little shapes out. Now, I had said don't cut all the way across. The only place you can really do that is down here at the bottom. So I'm just gonna cut a little, almost like the top of a triangle. This looks like a little diamond that I cut out of there. Something I forgot to mention, you really must leave a couple places where the fold of the paper still shows. If you were to cut a zigzag all the way up the side of your snowflake, it would fall apart into pieces. So I'm gonna show you this. So I'm gonna open this up. This is a very nice snowflake, I'm sure. Okay, there. So that's that's what the basic snowflake looks like. But I'm gonna go back in and I'm gonna add some more. So I'm gonna fold it back up, which can be tricky sometimes, right? And this is a trick that I like to do. I'm gonna go into one of my shapes and I'm gonna cut out another shape. So I can see that there's a big chunk of white paper here. I'm gonna go inside this shape and I'm gonna cut out another shape. Just like that, right here. Okay, and I can do that pretty much anywhere. If I think, oh, you know what, I need a little more open space down here. Ooh, there we go. Sometimes you have to flip your snowflake over to get to the spots that you want to. All right, so the more paper that you remove, the fancier your snowflake will be. So I can come in here, take out a little chunk. If you accidentally cut through one of the parts and it falls off, you know what? That happens all the time, all the time. Okay, so now I'm gonna open this up and you'll see, I think that it's a little fancier than the first one. Right, it's getting a little fancier. Look, these look like little cats, kind of. And I'm gonna fold it up one more time. Now I'm gonna come back with my hole puncher. Now for me, the hole puncher is all about adding a little bit of detail, right? I'm just gonna bring it right in between. Now because your paper's folded up in so many layers, it may be difficult for you to punch it, right? Sometimes I get it lined up and then I have to use 2 hands to punch a hole in there. Just be patient, right? And then let's see, I will punch a hole here, maybe one here. The holes for me are, like I said, are details. Punching holes is super fun, but I just think it's more interesting when you cut your shapes out first and then punch the holes. Let's see, I can add a hole over here. The hole should improve it, but not be your main focus. Okay, that's interesting. Watch this. I'm gonna try to make a half a hole. Because I just unfolded it and I was like, see a spot that looks like it could use a hole right there. So now I'm gonna open it up. Here we go. And voila, my beautiful, super fancy snowflake. All right, so I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it helped. I will see you again soon.